Welcome to the Upshot, Multi-World Disc Golf's podcast about the latest in the disc golf world. I am the editor, Charlie Eisenhood. Joining me is Josh Mansfield, and we had our first Silver Series event of the year, Josh, the Open at Belton. Wins on the board for Catrina Allen and Chris Dickerson. Very impressive performance from Dickerson. Had a 6-shot lead heading into the final round. That is a rare sight. And I got some stats to share with you about that in just a moment. First, Josh, how was your weekend? How are things?
It was good. A busy weekend. But this weekend, I'm going to a tournament over in Boise, a couple hours away. And my wife and I are taking a couple extra days because it will be our 2-year anniversary. So have a nice trip for this weekend. Get to watch some disc golf, play some disc golf. It'll be good.
That's great. Quick mulligan for us. I honestly, we do so many shows now, I can't keep track of when we talk about what. But we were discussing Texas State's, and we made the wrong assumption, that the course that was going to be played for the Texas State Championships this year was going to be the same one that we saw last season. Well, that is just not the case. They have a whole new course it's kind of like a mishmash of 3 different courses that have been built into this new layout. And so, don't expect all woods. That's not what we're going to have. It's going to be a more mixed course, something along the lines of like a Waco. And of course, we will break all of that down on Thursday's episode. But, we kind of talked about how Texas State's was going to be a bellwether tournament for what we might see a Champions Cup at W.R. Jackson. But I'm not really sure that that's quite the case now. I think, obviously you can prognosticate based on performance in the woods on certain holes, just the way players form as in general, but it's not going to be that kind of clear, woods course comparison.
Mm-hmm. Still will be good though. Excited to see it this weekend.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm glad we're getting a new course, to be honest. It's nice to see some variety. So far we've pretty much seen the same courses as we saw last year to start the tour. Not a lot of changes, except the bizarre par 5 to par 3 13th
yes.
At Belton. So fun show for you today. Before we talk Belton, Eagle McMahon just dropped a new YouTube video. Well, it's kind of just a goofy video, but at the end, he provides an update about his shoulder situation. Of course, that shoulder injury has kept him out of the last couple tournaments, and he's not scheduled to come back until Champions Cup, basically. So here is the latest from Eagle McMahon.
The shoulder I'm going to get an MRI next week. And my consensus right now, my uneducated opinion, is that I have a torn labrum, but I don't believe it's that bad. So that kind of jeopardizes the events I play, but potentially I'll play the Champions Cup anyway, but we'll see. There are some potential treatments that I'm looking at that would have me back sooner rather than later, one of them being stem cell therapy. I've done quite a bit of research on it, and it seems pretty low risk, and it has the most upside in the shortest possible time. So that's what I'm looking into.
So there you have it. Eagle McMahon going in for an MRI next week, thinking that he may have a torn labrum. Josh, you work in the physical therapy world. I'm sure that this is not a great injury. In fact, in baseball, this is looked at as like one of the worst injuries to get because it can be difficult to come back from, and particularly if you get surgery, it can take quite a long time. I mean, you see estimates ranging from 4 months to like up to a year. And for somebody like Eagle, who is obviously putting a lot of impact and pressure on that shoulder with the throws that he, essentially like a pitcher throwing sidearm, that's going to mean potentially longer recovery times required to get back to 100%. Regardless of what the situation is with his shoulder, the fact that he's now having to go in for an MRI tells me that he's clearly not recovering at the pace that he was expecting or hoping to at this point.
It really interests me, and I hope we get the chance to talk to Eagle once we kind of hear back from the results of this MRI, as to the diagnostic process that led to this point right now. Because a torn labrum, depending on where it's torn, the most common anterior tear of a labrum is diagnosable through ultrasound. And so I'd be surprised if his physician or even the therapist that's been treating him and working with him didn't perform an ultrasound to see if there was a tear, or if it just didn't show up on that ultrasound clearly. I'm really interested to know what this process was that led to an MRI, because he's been nursing this shoulder injury for, is it 6?
Literally for months, because it happened right before the Disc Golf Pro Tour Championship when he was doing that video shoot with Jomez.
So around 6 months. And typically, I mean, with a tear like that, you should be able to tell that you're not getting better within 2 to 3. And after 2 to 3 months of not improving, that's when you're like, okay, we should probably go order an MRI. I don't know. I am not a physical therapist myself. I don't have any license or medical degree, but I do work in that field. And so I'm just really concerned as to the process that it took to wait 6 months to go get an MRI in order to, diagnose a labrum tear. So I'm interested to hear the results of the MRI before I jump to any conclusions.
Of course.
If it is positive, though, I mean, like you were talking about, it's a really devastating injury. Recovery time is going to be a long time. But the reason why is that labrum plays an important role in shoulder stabilization. And there's a risk that, I mean, even after a full year of recovery, the Eagle may not be back to full power because of that loss of stabilization due to the injury, and then the fact that it may not have been addressed or been operated on for so long.
Yeah. And like, I understand. I mean, he wants to go the stem cell route, and that's obviously been a tremendous area of growth in medical science. And it's a process that certainly is less invasive and has less recovery time than getting surgery, which is going to take like minimum 4 months.
Right.
And I mean, I guess the hope is that it works. Like,
right.
It probably depends on the severity of the injury. And it's kind of like on the cutting edge of technology for doing recovery from something like this. I think, if you have the money to do something like that, which Eagle does, I think it's worthwhile to pursue it first before you get a surgery that's going to take you out for basically the season. I mean, if he has to get a full
thickness
surgery,
tear on that labrum. Yeah.
There's
surgery to repair it.
You're looking, okay, so it's March, right? So April, May, June, July is the 4 month mark. And for a thrower like Eagle, not just like a regular person who's trying to go about their day and like maybe go to the gym, it's probably going to be longer than that. So you figure you're not looking until probably September before you could think about even coming back. And at that point, you may not have even really been throwing that much yet. So you got to shut down. Like, there's no reason at that point to even try to come back in the 2022 season. What's the point?
Yeah.
You're just going to risk having a recurring injury there. And that is one of the other risks with labrums, is that if you don't get it fully fixed, you can like tear it again. And anyway, I mean, obviously hoping for the best for Eagle, it's a concerning development that he has to go in for an MRI now. And I agree with you, Josh. Like, why is this happening now as opposed to like in October of last year? Like, that's the first thing. Maybe it was, maybe they didn't, it was inconclusive. Hoping to talk to Eagle and get a little more information. And of course, hoping for him to have a swift recovery. But it's a bummer. It's a bummer.
Yeah.
The Upshot is presented by Pound Disc Golf, makers of the best bags in the sport. And you know what? If you want to get the custom pack that you envision in your mind's eye, the pack of your dreams, you can do it at any time. Go to pounddiscgolf.com and you can get your custom Octothorpe, your custom Octahall, your custom Carlton, your custom Toolbox, and their custom pack builders are now open all the time. No more waiting for drops or hoping that you get lucky. You can just go build your pack. You can tinker with it for a while before you hit the order button, but you can check it all out on their website, and you can just design it exactly how you want, from the zippers to the main flap to the bottom of the pack, exactly what you envision. PoundDiscGolf.com. All right, so let's turn our attention to the Open at Belton, again, for Silver Series event of the year. And as last year, very well attended. I mean, felt a little bit like, as I think we talked about on our live React show on Sunday, Josh, for our Ultiworld Disc Golf subscribers, which you know what to do, discgolf.ultiworld.com/subscribe, get in the Discord, get the Upshot bonus segments, a lot of other subscriber benefits, and it's less than $4 a month. And we talked about how, it's kind of like a Elite Series minus, or like Silver Series plus, like kind of in between what we think of as a Silver Series, where you're not really going to see the top players, but not as good as the top events. You're not going to see all of the top players there, particularly on FPO. There are a number of players missing. No Evelina, no Henna, no Paige, but still very competitive and very exciting. I mean, in FPO, Catrina Allen holding on to a small lead throughout the round, mostly going back and forth with Kristen Tatar on the lead card, but Valerie Mondahano making the push from the chase card. And Catrina Allen had a 2-stroke lead on hole 17 and didn't know the score, ran the putt, apparently, and just, it had too much of the flight plate exposed to the wind. It got pushed. It floated over the hill on 17 and like pushed maybe 25 feet away. Missed a comebacker, takes a bogey, and opens the door on 18. But Catrina Allen turns around and throws a sketchy drive that happens to get through everything, and then throws maybe her best upshot of the day, just a pinpoint shot right to the pin, and has a little 5-footer to get the win with the birdie and avoid a playoff with Valerie Mondahano. So Catrina goes back-to-back. It's her 5th time winning the Open at Belton. And, aside from a couple of little mistakes here and there, continues to just look like she's in great form. Some of the best disc golf she's played in a few years.
No one is ever going to tell us this, but I would be really interested to know in how many close contests like this, people go into final holes not knowing scores and then lose. Right? Because we only talk to the winners.
No one will admit.
No, they won't. I wouldn't admit. Oh, heck no, I wouldn't admit that. Right? If I was Catrina and I had lost this tournament and someone was like, so what was up with 17? And they're like, I just felt the pressure of Valerie pushing and I decided to run it. Like, no way am I going to be like, I just didn't know scores. I thought I was far enough ahead because I was ahead of Kristen that I ran it. Like, no one would ever admit that. But it is shocking to me that with the depth of the fields, the competitiveness of the fields right now, both an MPO and an FPO, that you would, or at the very least, your caddy wouldn't have the scores handy and be like updating you on what the game plan should be based on the circumstances. Because if Catrina lays up, takes a par,
it's basically over.
It's over, right?
Even with an OB stroke, you probably win.
Right. And then, I mean, Catrina then just throws 3 upshots on hole 18 and taps out for the par, and life is really easy and stress-free. And instead she gets a drive that honestly felt kind of lucky. Like, and that's the reason she maintains that. But
didn't even know, as she said in the post-game interview, didn't even know that she needed to make the putt on 18 until she walked to step up to the putt. Listen, I understand players in some cases prefer just to not know the score and just to feel like they just need to go out and execute their shots. I really do understand it. If you're going to choose that, you must have your caddy paying attention to the scores on every hole, on every shot. And like, yeah, sure, in the first 12, 13 holes, you're probably not going to make decisions unless you have a big lead or you're way behind to do things differently than you normally would. But There is no world in which Catrina shouldn't have just skidded a putter up the hill to the little, wood barrier and then tapped in, and has to know that. Like, Austin Hannum, who was carrying her bag, absolutely must tell her that she shouldn't be running that putt. There's just too many ways for it to go wrong, and it went wrong exactly the way that you would expect it to go wrong.
Yeah.
And what? But that's just, it's like I play backgammon, big backgammon guy.
Oh, love backgammon. Yeah.
Great. So in backgammon, it's like there are some times where you're kind of deciding between two moves, and it's about like your equity value in the move that you make. Backgammon is not quite a fully solved game, I don't think, but computers are able to really analyze positions and tell you what the best move is. So unlike chess, which is incredibly complex, backgammon is much simpler. It's like, here's the position, here's the roll. There's only so many moves you can make. Which of these is the best based on your chances of, like gaining value against your opponent in term. And, there's obviously a lot of luck with the dice, but you can put yourself in a better position to win. This was a huge loss of equity value for Catrina to run the putt. Like, even so, if you make it, sure, your percentage of winning goes up even higher still because she takes the birdie and, gets an extra stroke of separation. But obviously the downside is that if you miss, it can roll away, it can fly away, it can, do all kinds of crazy stuff on this elevated green. So there's just no world in which the risk is worth it. And I just feel like you have to know that. And I still can't really understand, like, over and over we hear these things from pros like, oh, I had no idea what the scores were. I'm like, how is that possible? You need to have a caddy out there who's at least telling you, you should run this, you shouldn't run this, you need to be aggressive, you need to be conservative. It's kind of surprising.
Well, and I mean, the other thing about it is, if you're Austin Hannum and you're her caddy, if she needs to run the putt, then that's one thing, right? Like going up and telling somebody, hey, you really need this. Like that, that's pressure, right? But to go up and say, hey, just put that next to the pin, don't run it. Like that takes the stress away. It's because the philosophy of don't tell me the scores is that it stresses you out, right? It puts too much pressure on you.
Yeah.
This could have taken pressure off.
Right.
I don't understand. I think that if this is true, and if it's always true when pros are saying I didn't know the score, and this is still a prevailing philosophy for professionals, because I talked to Kevin Jones in an interview in early rounds at Worlds, and he's like, yeah, I don't check scores until like final day, and that's probably true, right? And that's fine,
and that makes sense. I mean, it's not like you're really going to alter your game plan in round 2 of the World Championships because you're down a few strokes. Like, that would be crazy, right? You're gonna make yourself play worse.
Mm-hmm. But if it is a prevailing philosophy to just not look at scores even when you're in final rounds and you're near the top, people are going to, and probably already have, lost tournaments because of it, and they just don't admit it out loud.
Yeah. I mean, on the other hand, I will say this. Catrina looks so confident right now, and her putter looks so confident right now that it is possible, it is theoretically possible that she knew that she could lay up, right? Like, let's say Austin said, Catrina, you can lay up here. She's like, nah, I'm going for it. I got this. I'm close. I can make this putt. That's a reasonable choice. Like, if you feel like your chances of making the putt are that high, I mean, I still disagree with the decision if that is the, but because, it's just like, she can just easily play 18 and win the tournament. It's just, there's so many ways for it to go wrong. Like, the fact that she was able to get up and down after the miss, that's not even guaranteed. It's easy to have it hit the cage, roll away, go over the other side. You're playing the leg over and back and over and back.
Kevin Jones has a video from the Portland Open that he'd love to show her.
Right. Right. So anyway, I mean, overall though, despite the, opening the door there on 17, Catrina really looked good.
She did. Yeah.
That was only her. It was her third Circle 1 miss of the day there on 17. And hit a bunch of putts.
Mm-hmm.
Just looked sharp and in control throughout the entire tournament. I mean, her round 2 when she was bogey free, not her best Circle 1 putting performance, but hit a 40-footer on hole 2, got the eagle on hole 5, and just avoided mistakes better than other players. Never went OB, and it's that consistency that's had Catrina rising to the top of the leaderboard a bunch.
I mean, she put 68% Circle 1X for the weekend. Like that's a rate that we said if Catrina bumps up her percentage a few percentage points, right, and gets to just kind of overall, I'm curious, let's look at 2022 versus 2020. So 2022, she is 61% Circle 1X putting and 18% Circle 2 putting. And then we jump down to 2021, 63% and 16%. So comparable numbers, but I felt like, I don't know, it feels better this season. It feels more confident, and maybe it's just recency bias towards the way she's been playing. But it feels like she's doing enough on the putting green, whereas there were tournaments last season where that didn't feel like the case.
Well, what I feel like I haven't seen anything, and I haven't watched every single putt from Catrina Allen this season, but I'm not seeing her miss the 15 footers.
Yeah.
Or the 10 footer. I mean, we've seen she's got good snap, confidence, power in those Circle 1 putts. She's always had it from Circle 2. And sure, she's missing some, but she's missing from 30 feet.
Right.
It's not from 10 or 15 feet. And that's a big kind of difference. Like there's, I wish we could if we had more fine-grained metrics, we would be able to talk more about that. But it clearly just looks better. I don't think there's a question about it. So I got some Chris Dickerson info for you. You ready for this?
Yep, I'm ready.
First of all, this is the first time since Kevin Jones at the 2020 Green Mountain Championships where an MPO player went into the final round of an Elite Series, Major, or Silver Series event with a 6-stroke lead.
Wow.
Okay, so it's been, a year and a half. Did not happen in 2021.
Okay.
Now, notably, and this courtesy of StatMando. Shout out to StatMando for all these great stats and doing this research. 2021 was the first time that there were not any 6-stroke leads since 2010. So that stat shows you that the competition has increased. Mm-hmm. That we had no 6-stroke leads going into the final round in 2021. Okay. Now, I was hoping to know this before the broadcast, but the last time a player lost with a 6+ stroke lead after any round was at the 2017 European Open, when Barsby had a 6-stroke lead after 2 rounds, but after the 4 rounds lost by 1 to Macbeth in that classic battle.
Good thing Macbeth didn't have an extra round here. Am I right?
And this maybe wouldn't have been the best stat to share during the broadcast, but an MPO player has never blown a 6-stroke lead in the final round. It's only happened twice in FPO, when Paige Pierce made comebacks at 2018 Waco and 2017 Vibram. Okay. And basically Dickerson has never lost a lead like this in a final round in his entire career. And I mean, he did kind of, he put a wedge in the door. Like it started to open, but he didn't let it really ever get fully open. Lead got to low as 3, and then he maintained that the rest of the way. He made a couple big errors early in the round, kicked out of bounds on hole 4. But mostly Chris Dickerson was just rock solid this weekend. And I think we've seen him put together good rounds at the early events this year, but not a full tournament yet. Mm-hmm. Well, he just put together the full tournament and looked awesome doing it. Ends up winning by 3 strokes over both Paul Macbeth and Ricky Wysocki.
It really was just a wire-to-wire performance from Chris Dickerson where he just felt like the Chris Dickerson of Classic, and it was good to see him back in there. I'm really excited that he's turning that on because I really feel like his game sets up well for both Texas State's as well as the Champions Cup. And I'm glad to see him coming into form, coming into those events. I really think Chris Dickerson should be a top contender when it comes to Champions Cup, just based on
100%.
his increasing performance, his history at majors, and now this weekend, I think really just kind of solidifies and makes it clear that he should be in your top 3 when you come to your Champions Cup picks.
No doubt about it. Shout out to Paul McBeth, who shot hot rounds in rounds 2 and 3 after taking a kind of brutal triple bogey on hole 4 in round 1 that sort of derailed his round. McBeth had what he believes was food poisoning after round 2. He was sick all night on Saturday, couldn't keep any food down before the start of the final round, and went out there and shot an 8 under. And made it decently interesting with the race with Dickerson. So, the guy's playing great. Obviously, just if he doesn't take that triple bogey, who knows what could have been.
And the other thing about it is it's not on the scorecard, but hole 17, Paul McBeth had a putt that was inside circle, hit a ton of chains right side, and then fell out. And he was very upset by it. You could clearly see the anger, not even frustration, but the pure anger at that basket for not catching that. But I mean, if that's the case, Paul finishes this tournament 5 down, or 5 birdies in a row for a 9 under. And it doesn't change the results by any means. I mean, Chris still knows he can go 3 pars and be fine, but it doesn't change the fact McBeth's 1 bad round does not change the fact in my mind that Paul McBeth still looks the best out of any of these guys.
Yeah, I mean, one tournament's not going to change our minds about much of anything, really. I think it's easy to overreact, especially at the beginning of the season. And arguably we already have overreacted in some ways to some stuff going on.
Well, I'm sticking to that overreaction, Charlie.
but I agree. I think, when you look through the eye test, McBeth has looked good. Wysocki has looked okay, good, but not at his level.
Mm-hmm.
Chris Dickerson has mostly looked really good with some inconsistencies. And, in terms of other guys, Calvin Heimberg has had awesome moments, but has also, continued to struggle a little bit with the putter. And he ends up finishing in 6th place this weekend. But, I think we have a pretty good sense of where players are at right now. And, it doesn't mean that that's how they're going to play at Champions Cup, but I think we have kind of a pecking order at this point, really in both divisions. And now it's a matter of, all right, who can sharpen up in the next few weeks as we head towards WR Jackson in Georgia.
Yeah, and I really feel like we're in a place that, I mean, Paul McBeth feels like dominant and a favorite to me. Chris Dickerson is now coming into form, but there are still a lot of guys who I think could take this from WR Jackson.
Oh, sure.
Who are showing a lot of flashes of former potential or just new players who are playing really, really well. And I'm really excited to see who brings it at the major.
Let's talk about some other storylines this weekend. Obviously a big name to start the year, Luke Humphreys. Well, how'd he do, Josh?
Not terrible, but definitely not up to the standards we were expecting. Luke Humphreys finishes in 24th at 11 under, 14 strokes off of the lead. He's around the names with the likes of Gannon Burr, Kevin Jones, Linus Carlson, Joel Freeman, and Paul Oman. So, I mean, it's not, if you had to pick a crowd to be with, tied with, it's not too bad, but unfortunately it's a little farther down the leaderboard than I bet you'd expect to be. So, definitely not his best performance, but I mean, knowing his start, it's hard to continue to live up to those expectations. And going into this season, I bet he'd be pretty happy with this performance overall. So, and it's a Silver Series. I'm willing to see if he turns around again at Texas State's.
I mean, he was a beast with the putter. He was second in putting, strokes gained. He shot 50% from circle 2. He was not sharp. He was below average tee to green, and so just off the tee, didn't bring it. Only got to 33% of greens in regulation. The top guys were hitting 50% plus.
Yeah.
And you got to put yourself in a position to get birdies, especially on a course like this, where a good tee shot is a critical feature in order to put yourself in a position to then throw the more important upshot in most cases. So let's see. How about Kevin Jones? Like, let's take a little. We haven't talked a lot about Kevin Jones yet this season. What's going on with Kevin Jones?
So I stuck this in there to talk about because I think we have given Kona kind of a hard time this season. I feel like it's mostly justified, to be completely frank. But if we're going to give Kona a hard time, I think we need to give Kevin Jones, talk a little bit about Kevin Jones. He has a 4th place finish at LVC, but never really felt like he was in contention. Waco finishes 21st. Open at Belton finishes at 24th. And I don't feel like we've really had any reason to talk about Kevin Jones at all this season, even with his 4th place performance at LVC. His stats are okay. I mean, he's got top 10 in fairway hits and parked. But then, I mean, in putting, Circle 1X is 31st and Circle 2 is 91st with 82 and 18%. And Kevin Jones is known for being a pretty good putter. It's just, I find it concerning because Kevin Jones has, in my opinion, one of the best developed all-around games. I really don't see, I don't have a strong suit for Kevin. I mean, he's known for his Circle 2 putting and being just outside circle and those jump putts that he does. But I feel like Kevin has one of the best all-around developed games, and he just got paid big by Prodigy. I mean, he is Prodigy's guy now, and we're not seeing him on coverage. It's Luke Humphreys who we're seeing and talking about on Prodigy. It's Gannon Burr who we're seeing and talking about on Prodigy. And so I think it's noteworthy that even in the tournament that Kevin Jones did well, he's still outshined by another Prodigy teammate. And this then, I mean, kind of begs the question that we've talked a ton about with Kona is, you have Kevin Jones here. He's your guy. When is he going to step up and perform to the contract expectations? I understand that's not what necessarily moves plastic.
Yeah.
But, Gannon Burr won his turn, or, got to the playoff by throwing the Kevin Jones signature driver that they produced in his lineup. So he's still moving plastic. But this feels, I have been one who's always wanted, I'm like, yep, Kevin Jones. I put him in my top 5s. I pick him all the time. I think he's great. And he lets me down. He lets me down sometimes.
I think this feels like kind of standard for Kevin Jones. I also think that maybe a little bit of these particular courses, 54th at Waco last year, 14th at Belton last year, and then he turns around and gets top 5 at Texas State's. I just feel like he's a little bit more of a volatile player compared to others, who have that sort of that higher level of consistency. But broadly, his stats look pretty similar to last year. His Circle 2 putting numbers are down a little bit, and his scramble hasn't been very sharp, but obviously that's very much correlated to your putting. If you're hitting your Circle 2 putts, you're probably scrambling better. So I don't really see like things in the stats that make you feel like he's suddenly a different player or something. He finished 7th on the Pro Tour in points last year. Right now he's sitting in 10th. So this feels like Kevin Jones' typical situation. Like he's going to pop off on certain weekends that look amazing. And he's going to have weekends where he finishes down in the, 30th or whatever. It happened a few times last year. He was 34th at MVP. He was 32nd at the Vintage Open, 54th at Waco. You don't necessarily see those kinds of performances from the likes of Paul McBeth. A bad weekend for Paul McBeth is like 12th. And I just think that's Kevin Jones's game. It's like a little bit like if he's not totally dialed right, he tends to go OB a little bit more than the average player. He's a little more aggressive than the average player. And that's going to come with volatility. And this doesn't concern me, basically. And if I'm Prodigy, I'm not concerned. Like, Obviously, if this extends for months, then sure, you get a little worried about it. But as it stands, I think this is just typical Kevin Jones.
And I guess what I think there then is if this is Kevin Jones, if this is typical Kevin Jones, then I think we might need to temper our expectations, because this field of MPO players is better than it's ever been before. And I don't think there are going to be a ton of Kevin Jones then who pop off and have 2 or 3 great tournaments every year, and then also have some under 25 finishes. I think he needs to develop more consistency.
Yeah,
Kevin
but I
Jones.
mean, I don't know. I feel like you're being a little too harsh on him, because the guy's still a top 5 finisher on a regular basis. We're not talking about somebody who, a Mason Ford who wins a tournament once and then otherwise is,
sure,
maybe a top 10 is a good result. Like Kevin Jones is a top 10 player on tour. He does it in a different way than some other guys. And yeah, like, is he Paul McBeth? No, he's not. He's not Paul McBeth, but he's still really good. He just has higher volatility. So you're going to have more 3 to 4 to 5 finishes than almost anybody else on tour. Mm-hmm. And you're also going to have, compared to the other top guys, probably more sub 25th place finishes.
That's fair. I think that's a good way to put it. It just feels like Kevin Jones had a lot of hype going into this season.
Sure.
And I think it's fair that we talk about if he's meeting those expectations.
I'm with you 100%. I mean, the putting has to improve a little bit. He was 29% Circle 2 putter last year, sitting 18% right now. Bread and butter, right, is him hitting those Circle 2 putts. So that's got to get better. And when it does, he's going to start finishing higher on the leaderboard.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Valerie Mondahano. We mentioned on the sub bonus episode that, it's right now the best players so far this season have been Catrina and Kristen Tatar and Valerie Mondahano. And Valerie Mondahano looking really good again, Josh.
Yeah, she did. That chase card push was incredible. It really was something stellar to watch, and she looked so confident, and I think it was really impressive to see. I guess the question I asked for you then, Charlie, is where do you feel like Valerie Mondahano sits in terms of like power rankings on this season?
Well, probably third.
For reference,
arguably second.
Okay, I'll give you for reference.
I'm going to say third.
Disc Golf Ultiworld, we just had come out with power rankings again, updated on March 18th. So this is the order right now. Catrina Allen, who is in first. Prior, she was second. Kristen Tatar is in second. Prior was third. Valerie Mondahano is third. Prior 13th. And then you have Paige in fourth, Evelina in fifth, Haley King in sixth. I think that's the group that we've talked about.
Sure.
So I think that's a fair.
Let's go one spot down, and Cat Merch, shout out.
Cat
playing great.
Was not even on the power rankings in the previous
fourth
edition.
in the Pro Tour standings right now.
Yes. So shout out to Cat Merch. Do you feel like that? So you feel like Valerie maybe even belongs above Kristen? Is that what you're saying?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Like the combination, like Kristen Tatar has been there at every tournament.
Yeah.
Valerie Mondahano didn't play LVC. You got to get punished for that.
Yep.
But I think that, the win at Waco and the performance this weekend, how do you not put her in the top 3 right now in the power rankings? Now, to be clear, power rankings is not world rankings. Mm-hmm. Like, this is a much more recent looking list. And I think that the top 3 are definitely correct right now. I think the argument is like Haley King could maybe be higher, but she skipped Waco, she skipped Belton. So, I think you have to ding players for skipping events at least a little bit. So, yeah, I mean, do you disagree?
It's hard because I'm asking myself right now is, going into Champions Cup. And again, I recognize that power rankings are not world rankings, but going into Champions Cup, am I going to put Valerie on my podium? And Texas States is obviously going to have a big factor in that. There is a level, though, I think, of unproved experience at majors. She had that rough blow up at the Throw Pink Women's Championship. She has done well under pressure here in this season. But when we come to major time, I'm asking myself, am I going to care about what she's done for me lately? Or am I going to value the years of consistent experience and performance at the majors from Paige Pierce or from Evelina or from Haley King, who have been historically the better players? I don't know. I don't have an answer yet. We're not to Champions Cup. Texas State's going to be important. I want to pick Valerie going into Texas State because she's still from Texas and so playing well, and I don't want to pick against her in Texas. I feel like that just is setting me up for failure. But I'm not sure I'm comfortable yet sticking her in the podium when it comes time for a major at Champions Cup. And that is why I come to hesitation of wondering, on these power rankings, that third place slot, I think, is heavily contested. I think I agree that Valerie deserves it right now, but I don't know if I use this as the best predictor for what Champions Cup is going to be.
And I think that's fair. Power rankings are more about what you've done in the last couple months than it is about trying to predict the future. But let me give you this, Josh.
Okay.
The stats just tell you that Valerie Mondahano has improved dramatically as a player.
Okay.
Now, I know it's a very small sample size still to start the year, particularly for Valerie, who didn't play LVC, so only has a few rounds of actual stats. And both tournaments she's performed well at, so you're going to expect the stats to be good. But you just have to feel pretty good about what you're seeing. Last year, 27 and 48 in Circle 1 and Circle 2 in regulation.
Okay.
So far this year, 42 and 63. Okay? But it's also the putting. So far this year, she's 77% from Circle 1. And, you'd expect that number to still have some time that needs to stabilize, but she was 68% last year. So we're seeing like almost a 10% increase in putting percentage from Circle 1. I mean, that's a lot of strokes. The numbers tell you, it's not just the win-loss or winning Waco or whatever. The numbers are showing you that she's playing better. And I think the eye test is showing you that she's playing better. She's throwing further.
Mm-hmm.
She's putting better. So, yeah, well, I don't know that I'm going to pick Valerie Mondahano to make the podium at Champions Cup, but I might.
And that's what an improvement. An improvement that we might pick Valerie Mondahano to be in our podium for Champions Cup. So I completely agree. This is in no way a segment meant to knock Valerie or a question meant to knock Valerie. It's definitely a question, though, of just how good is she? And the answer, regardless of where she sits, is pretty dang good. Yeah. And I think we have to watch her throughout the season.
So let me hit you with the MPO Power Rankings that came out after Waco. Paul Macbeth, Chris Dickerson, Drew Gibson, who jumped 9 spots, Calvin Heimberg, Ricky Wysocki in 5th, and I want to get your reaction to this, Eagle McMahon drops 11 spots to 14th. So, thoughts on the top 5 and having Eagle fall as much as he did?
Accurate. Yes, especially in light of the recent news. I mean, imagine a world where going into the preseason, pick any sport, take your star player and have them injured. And this is even worse because it's an individual sport. There's no substitutions. There's no backups. You can't plug that hole until he's back. Like, you're not going to make it do.
There's no next man up in this case.
Right. Like, Eagle can't call up his second string and be like, all right, buddy, you've been training for years for this. You're up. Like, that's not how that works in disc golf. He's not here. He has no representation. He's not going to have any representation. And there's a possibility he won't this season. And so, honestly, 14th is like, it's kind of a shot in the dark about where he belongs, given the uncertain status of his injury right now. And like you said, it's about what you've done for me lately. It's also a predictor of what he's going to do in the future to an extent. And I think that this is a fair concern, not having seen any positive recovery. If anything, the fact that he stays this high, given, and this comes out pre-MRI. I probably am not this critical without knowing the MRI knowledge. Knowing and in my head thinking, if this guy has the torn labrum in his shoulder, pull him off the power rankings. Like,
you might have to. I mean, if he's going to miss a long chunk of the season, I mean, a good example is Nate Sexton is regularly not found in the power rankings.
Yes.
Is currently not in the top 25.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because he started the season in the top 25. He didn't play very well at Vegas, so he dropped out. But he also doesn't find himself back in there all that often because he just doesn't play enough events. Mm-hmm. And again, this is not a world ranking. This is not like, let's look at the last year or 2 years of data and say who played the best. I mean, we can look at the ratings for that. We don't really need, there's like a million ways to skin the same cat when you're talking about ranking players for like who they've been over the last year. This is much more about, what has happened lately. And this is a combination of input on the top 10 from various folks at Ulti-World Disc Golf, mm-hmm. and then an algorithm that takes a look at, with a decay function, how a player's been doing based on the money available at events, the strength of the field at the events, and you get penalized for not showing up to events. And it's, I think it runs out for like the last 4 to 6 months. So, Eagle's ranking is basically, he wasn't getting into top 10s because of his performance at LVC with the ballots. And then the algorithm took a look and said, well, you didn't play Pro Tour Championship. You didn't play Waco. You did so-so at LVC, and he ends up at 14th. And, you can quibble with that if you want, and some people do. But it's just like, you have to win. You have to play well to be up at the top in the power rankings. And it's not, Eagle kind of phoned it in on the last round at LVC. Yeah. No one is arguing, at least I'm not arguing, that Eagle is not one of the top 5 players in the world at full strength when playing. It's not even a question. But given the performance so far this season, if it wasn't Eagle, he wouldn't even be in the top 25.
Yeah. Yep. And look, regardless of the confirmation of that tear, the fact that he's going in for an MRI, I would be willing to bet right now that he is not 100% by Champions Cup, even if it comes back negative. Right? If you are still struggling to the point that you're going to order an MRI, a very expensive procedure, by the way, and
let's not get into the medical system and what a joke it is that it's so expensive, but continue.
Yes, buckle up, folks. 3 hours on the Ulti-World pod today. Anyway, MRIs are expensive. They typically are not done unless a doctor has evidence of either a test that indicates greater damage or some sort of failed rehabilitation efforts prior. They expect you to be better by then, either through physical therapy or just time, and neither have occurred. Given that that's the case, like I just don't expect to see Eagle at Champions Cup. And if he is there, I don't expect him to be 100%. And so honestly, 14th feels like as you said, Eagle will give it to you because you're Eagle. But then after that, I mean, that's the only favor you're getting right now because it's not looking positive for the future.
Well, I mean, I hope you're wrong.
I hope I'm wrong too.
I hope that the injury is curable and that he can be back to playing in a couple of months. Mm-hmm. And the only thing I'll say is I hope he doesn't try to come back too fast.
Yeah.
I actually don't really love that he played LVC. I mean, I understand it. You're a professional disc golfer. There's obligations to sponsors and all that stuff. It's also just a different situation when you think you're getting better and then maybe now you're feeling like you're not. But I hope he doesn't force himself to play because it's a major when the right long-term career choice might be to sit it out. And I know that's an excruciating decision for an athlete to have to make, but it's much more important that he get healthy, fully healthy, whatever it takes, than for him to go and play the first major of the season. Mm-hmm. Because, he obviously can be a many-time major champion if he is at full strength. I mean, he's so young still. So anyway, let us know your thoughts. Hit us up, upshot@ultiworld.com. Thoughts on the power rankings, thoughts on today's episode. We're going to be doing some mailbag soon, so get in your questions or your comments. You can also hit us up in the Discord if you're an Ultiworld Disc Golf subscriber. Really quick, let's take a look at our picks and our over-under from the week. And I promise you very soon, like within the next couple weeks, we're going to have a website to track our over-unders, our picks, and you'll be able to make your own bets on the over-unders and your own picks and be able to track that as well. So looking forward to that. It'll come very soon. Thank you so much to our listener. I'll have more when we roll it out. So Josh, the over-under was 49.5 on the best MPO score of the weekend. I took the under, and there were 3 scores underneath 49.5 and a 47 and 248s. So I get the W. It was a pretty good line, Josh. I think you could have maybe given yourself an extra point or maybe even 2 points. After
I made the line, I wished last week that I had done 48.5, but even still you would have gotten it by a couple of rounds. So two of the rounds were too windy and nobody shot really even that close. It was close. I almost had it. And then of course
round 2 was
were
primo nice. Conditions.
Yep. Oh, well. So you take the over under this week. You also take 5 points in our picks. So that puts over underscores, Charlie. You are now at 3. I'm at 2. And pick scores go up 15-10 because of your pick of Catrina Allen. We both had Paul Macbeth for the win. His round 1 kept him out of the ability to come back enough to win that. I had Kristen Tatar on FPO.
Good picks.
Good picks. But your Catrina is the only one that takes the 5 points for the weekend.
Somebody was very mean in the YouTube comments and said that we shouldn't go the route of traditional sports shows and make picks because it just make us look stupid. Right back at you, bro. Those are good picks right there. You're looking stupid in the YouTube comments.
We're both gonna just draw a big goose egg at Texas State.
Oh God, we're gonna go over.
Over 6, over 12. Is that?
He's like, you haven't done the research. I'm like, what research am I supposed to do? We're prognosticating. There's nothing to, like, we can look at the stats. We can look at how they did in the past, but that's what we do. We do that.
We do.
I don't know. I can't help you. If you don't like the picks, just don't listen to the picks. Okay, well, that is going to do it for today's show. We'll be back with you to preview Texas State's on Thursday. Don't miss our interview episode on Wednesdays. And I just want to plug last week's Luke Humphreys interview. You got to go check it out. Please listen to it. It's great. Learn about somebody who's just got a totally different vibe than most top disc golfers we talk to on the show. So for Josh Mansfield, I'm Charlie Eisenhood saying so long, and we'll talk to you on Thursday right here on The Upshot.